It's such a pleasure to meet with you today to talk about food too. I think you kind of started the food conversation, or the conversation around food with Fast Food Nation.
Yeah.
Um, since you wrote that book, that very impactful book all those years ago, tell me how the food industry in your eyes has evolved.
Yeah. I mean, there's good news. I mean, I'm feeling like a really old guy, but Fast Food Nation was almost 25 years ago. And it was really hard to get a book contract because all the New York publishers turned it down. They said nobody wants to read a book about food unless it has recipes in it. So what's really gratifying, and I'm not taking credit for it, but what's changed in the last 25 years is there are bookshelves like the one behind you full of books on food and debating food issues. And there's just been a renaissance and interest in food. And it's been really gratifying to see that happen because it's such an important subject. And things have changed for the better in the sense that there's so many more options. And well-educated and well-to-do people are eating really well. I mean, there's farmers markets, there's Trader Joe's, there's Whole Foods, there's no shortage of organic and sustainable and local food that's now available to you. And that's all wonderful. Uh, but Food Inc. too is really about a lot of the bad news. And a lot of the bad news is that most Americans don't have access to that healthier food because it's more expensive. And the cheap, unhealthy food is being heavily subsidized by the US government in countless different ways. And the power of a small handful of food corporations has just gotten bigger since when I wrote Fast Food Nation. And one of the secrets about Fast Food Nation is that it was about food, but it was really about unchecked corporate power and what the consequences can be, and about how one sector after another of our economy is being taken over by, you know, oligopolies or monopolies. And sadly, since the book came out, all of that has gotten worse. And that was one of the, reasons that we got together to make a sequel to Food Inc. was to just show how powerful a handful of companies have become over what we eat.
And it really does show that, the first one kind of started a movement. And now, like you said, we have the access. It's right there. But
Yeah,
what about affordability? How do we
yeah.
solve for that? And that's such a great question. Now, what about how many policymakers and lawmakers have responded? How have they responded, to you in the past, 25 years or even more
Yeah.
recently? Have they been more receptive to passing policy that would align with our objectives?
There have been some who have been extraordinary and wonderful. One would be Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, who has been one of the real voices for food safety for 20 years and played a major role in putting pressure on the infant formula companies after the huge recall of contaminated infant formula a couple of years ago. And so there have been elected officials that I've worked with in the film. We feature Senator John Tester and Senator Cory Booker, who come from very different backgrounds and very different constituencies. One is urban, one is rural, one has basically constituents who are suffering the consequences of this highly processed, unhealthy food, and the other has constituents who are farmers who are being driven off the land by the same companies that are selling this unhealthy food. So they're really a remarkable duo and are working closely together. It was always a dream that there would be an urban-rural alliance against some of these, big companies. And I think with Cory Booker and Senator Tester, that's what you're seeing. So there are some who, who get it and have been remarkable. And then there are others who I don't think would invite me in their office based on the kinds of things that I've been writing for the last 25 years. And those are the elected officials who are accepting large amounts of money from big agribusiness companies. I mean, so much of the problem boils down to the amount of money in politics and how these companies are able to buy the representatives that they want.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And what would your call to action be for us, for people watching the film? We're going to be galvanized after we see it, but with our pocketbooks, how can we create impact and kind of get your messaging across the finish line?
Well, the first thing I would encourage is to take care of yourself and take care of your family. And what you eat and where you get it has huge consequences for your longevity, and not only for how long you live, but how you feel while you're alive. So for those, who have children, especially the kind of eating habits and the kind of foods that they're feeding them. And the section on ultra processed foods in the documentary, I think is quite stunning, and the implications are quite stunning. So the first thing is know what you're eating, know what you're feeding your kids, take care of yourself. And then the second would be go beyond that and think about the society that we live in. And as a citizen, the kind of injustices that you're connected to. The first that comes to mind is, the poor immigrant workers, mainly immigrant, who harvest the healthiest foods as migrant farm workers, but who also work in the meatpacking plants. And we need to really support measures that protect them from harm, pay them a decent wage. I mean, California just passed a law that provides a minimum wage for fast food workers, which is terrific. And all the fast food companies are outraged, and they say that the food is going to be more expensive. Well, right now, it's taxpayers who are paying for the healthcare costs. I mean, in California, before this law was passed, 1/3 of fast food workers relied on public assistance. That is, they got their health care or they got food stamps through the government. And that's not right. Companies should pay their workers enough so that they don't have to depend on public assistance. And the last is to get engaged politically so that we can help break up these big companies and restore free markets and competition again. A really good example of what happens when you don't have competition is what's going on with Boeing right now. We used to have three competing manufacturers of commercial airliners in the United States. There was Boeing, but there was also Lockheed and McDonnell Douglas. And when you only have one company like that, I mean, there is Airbus, but that's an overseas company. The company gets lazy, the company gets sloppy, and you see that kind of problem. The same is true in many other sectors of the economy. So competition helps to keep these companies on their toes and innovating and eager to serve the consumer, not rip them off.
I think that's very well said, and that's great advice. And we look forward to hearing everyone's thoughts after seeing the film. I know it's probably going to start another movement here. Um, what is it? Almost 15 years later is the
Yeah,
second film.
yeah.
So it's really exciting to see your work continue. It
Thank
was
you.
so much impact you created 25 years ago, and I feel like the genesis of this movement was your book. And now that
Thank
you're
you very
still
much.
involved and you're pushing for, and you've got the policymakers involved, we're really optimistic about the future. So thank you
It
so
doesn't
much.
have to be this way. It really,
Yes.
if things couldn't be changed, I'd be writing about great beaches in the Polynesia or something like that.
Right.
But what keeps me going on this subject is it just doesn't have to be this way. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And we look forward to hearing everyone's comments after they see the film.
Okay. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.